Hey everybody, Jeff Tidwell here with another one of my tweet videos for you on this lovely Sunday afternoon here in the Boston area, Quincy, Massachusetts, the historic city of presidents. Of course, I can be found on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Minds, Gab, Telegram, Parler. If you're not watching this video on YouTube, you're watching it on BitChute. And if you enjoy the comment, please do leave me a like and subscribe below. Of course, if you like the content a lot and want to get notifications, please hit the little bell. And if you find my cadence to be a little bit on the slow side, you can hit the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half the time. Time is the currency, of course, and that is double bang for your buck. Pretty good deal, so check that out. And without further ado, let's go back to June 2018 and my tweets from that period. And of course, we'll do a long form video today, per usual, warts and all, and then you can check out segments from this video later on my channels. So without further ado, let's get into some tweets. Starting with this one about President Trump and foreign policy. On Trump and Chairman Kim and the U.S. political press. Okay, boys and girls, time to stop rooting for disaster. Time to stop undermining the peace process. Time to start understanding that the 2016 presidential election is over. Time to stop promoting war and start promoting peace. Please. So, I am troubled sometimes when I see that on either side of the aisle, may you be a Democrat or a Republican, wherever you might be on the political sphere, people sometimes tend to root against the peace process when their side isn't in power because they don't want the other side getting the credit, getting the merit for doing a good job, establishing peace and developing a foreign policy that, may be not necessarily a isolationist, but less interventionist. Sort of like what Tulsi Gabbard has been talking about, and to some degree President Trump. So back in 2018, the situation was more about the North Korean conflict and the strides we made there. And people were, of course, as they usually do, the president's critics were coming after him and his team as they were trying to work on the diplomatic process. Saying, any sort of, and it continues to this day, a year and a half later, any missiles that were fired that, regardless of if they were within agreement or not, they would be criticized, of course. Now, there is reason to worry if you don't understand, as I often don't, the foreign policy, the war games situation, the military. I'm not a military commander, and I'm, of course, but I also wouldn't necessarily defer to the press, because the press, also kind of pushed us along into the war in Iraq. They said that, hey, WMDs are there. They listened to Robert Mueller's testimony when he was in the FBI. We have a largely, people talk about neocon, neoliberal press. We do have a media that promotes war because war brings in ratings, okay? It creates a culture of fear. People worried about, and there might be legitimate worries about ISIS or about the Taliban. Now, we're going through that now. The Taliban, Trump canceling his meeting after they apparently killed about 10 or 11 people, including a couple soldiers, or one soldier. Seek subject matter experts, do your research, take a look at the news, go through Google, run through the algorithm, and find the truth. It might be harder than it sounds like, but definitely look into that. But of course, we need to be able to negotiate, to make a deal, to talk to foreign leaders, dictators, bad hombres, whoever it might be. We do need to continue this process. May it be Iran or North Korea, or Afghanistan, wherever it might be, Russia, and of course the Ukraine and Russia are getting some things done in their process, with Ukraine being Crimea, I should say, being annexed by Russia. That situation is moving along, but people need to talk. It's better to be talking with words and not saying words are violence. Violence is words. They're the same thing, and attacking instead. It's better that we do, sanctions, anything before putting the military in. I prefer that. So don't root for disaster just because your political team is not in power. It's important that we all always work towards world peace. It's common, it's almost a cliche, a trope, that we look for world peace when we're in power. If the president's job is to maintain order, to maintain a strong world economy with fewer conflicts. So, of course, we do want to talk to these leaders. And, I would say that I would support a sitting president regardless of if I believed in their ideology or not, because I want to see all of us do well. Like these sort of political games, the post-truth realm that is politics, and getting what you want in terms of your favorite politicians, that's all well and good. Like, that's fun. But really, I want to see the world prosper, and I mean everybody. I might be a nationalist for America. I might be somebody that believes in my country first, but I also do want to see everybody else with the same mentality, and I want to see them have success. So, of course, we do need to, I want to see North Korea part of the world economy. I want to see Iran part of the world economy. I don't harbor any sort of xenophobia towards these groups. I think that we need to work hard and, not capitulate, not do the wrong thing, not do the easy thing that we regret later, but talk. And, don't try to find problems with the process. Work through it. If we have an issue, if you need to walk away from the table, that's negotiation. You can't just say, well, we're always going to agree, and you have to do exactly what I say, and I'll do what you say. I will lie down, you will lie down. Neither side wants to lie down in any negotiation. It has to be respectful. It has to be worked over to find an equitable end where both sides, neither side is completely right or completely wrong. The truth lies between. The equity lies between. You have to find it by talking. So, yeah, I don't want to see the press rooting for disaster like we didn't get anywhere with North Korea through the Clinton years, the Bush years, Obama. In fact, it may have even gotten worse. And of course, President Trump says, no, we want to heal the wounds of the past. The Korean War was decades and decades, 75 years ago. Okay, check my facts on that in the comments below. 75 years ago, this has been over. But, you needed to have maybe a third party come in, maybe President Trump, maybe the UN. But between South Korea and North Korea, things are better than, after a year, I can say this tweet holds some truth, holds some merit, that things have gotten better, and we want to continue this process. We don't want to be pointing to Kim Jong-un and say, well, you've done all these bad things. Of course he's done those bad things. He's done humanitarian disasters. He's done evil things, as many dictators have, as many autocrats, as they say, have. Okay, these totalitarian regimes. But we can't hold their face down in the shit, right? We can't hold them down in the shit and say, hey, smell it. Smell all the shit you created. That's not going to get them to the table. That's not going to get them to change their ways. We need to use diplomacy, but of course the economy as leverage as well. Say, well, if you want to be part of the world economy, if you want the sanctions off, and of course we don't want to attack militarily at all, but if you want the sanctions off, maybe you should change your ways. Like, I think the same solution could be used with China and the way they're treating Hong Kong, that wants its sovereignty, wants its freedom, looks at American values, American color values, check out my video on that, and says, we want those, we like those. We're strong, we're intelligent, we are pious people, we are interested in participating in the world economy, and we want to have all the freedoms that we see over in the West. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. But if China is not going to allow that to happen, well, maybe we should slow down our trade with China. There's a hashtag going around about decoupling. Now, I don't really have a strong opinion either way. I would like us to work with China. I would like us to work with Russia and continue the trade between those two countries and the United States of America. Like, that is a good place to be. But, again, you can't capitulate. You have to stand your ground and fight for what is right. Fight for your values. So we want, we don't do all this work. We don't do all these, regime change, interventionist, counterinsurgency wars because we don't want to help the world. Like, of course, we are helping the military-industrial complex. We're helping American industry, but we do want to heal the world so that there isn't any killing and any conflict. It's not good for business. So, yeah, I don't get, rooting against peace when it's not your side in power. I guess this mostly applied to the TDS folks, but it's worth saying for sure. All right, onward to another tweet. Yeah. Yes, it's a little funny, isn't it? And a little sad watching the pundits squirm. Watching the pundits squirm. Especially when it comes to, those neocons, like your Bill Kristols out there. It's a little funny, it's a little sad watching pundits squirm, grasping at what remains of the fading paradigm that their entire careers have been built around. What do they do when the tides turn? Can their analysis ever be trusted again? It must be scary. I sympathize with them. I do. If you've been existing in this media paradigm, whatever's been established as the macro simulation, the narrative, as it were, this sort of overarching meta-narrative that carries from news station to news station through all the syndicates, carries through the airwaves, carries onto the internet, carries in the words of tweets and social media, just everywhere. What happens when the culture war turns the tide? What happens when the paradigm begins to shift? Say, for example, away from political correctness and all those things and into, more back into the politically incorrect. Just one example of a paradigm shift that may occur. That, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And they say there's no such thing as the slippery slope. This is a complicated question. Of course, when we talk about things like inertia never stopping, it just keeps on going and going. That's not how physics works. That's not how reality works, of course. There is always a counterforce at the other side that pushes you back. Well, if culture went into a specific direction a little bit too much and more people felt disenfranchised and alienated by what was going on, if faith overtook reason and modern religion took the place for both the devoutly secular and non-secular, but those that don't have a religion, if they found a modern religion, even though that truth, reality, and ideology, ideology and reality run on parallel, sometimes interweaving tracks. We have all these things happening, these movements happening, but eventually there must be a counterforce that says, well, maybe that's enough. Maybe it's time to move the other way. Maybe it's time to stop here, be neutral right here. We've had enough of cancel culture, outrage culture. We've had enough, perhaps, of the modern religion that is social justice. Maybe there's been enough censorship, perhaps. Some people might say that. And maybe not. Maybe this isn't the truth. This, of course, is all subjective. But maybe we've had enough of hearing about the modern religion of global warming. Hey, maybe we've heard enough about those silly libs. Maybe we should stop trying to divide people up by making fun of the left and the right. Maybe it's better if things go in a different direction. I don't know. I'm not making an opinion or a judgment call. I'm just throwing a lot of things out there. But of course, in the news industry, yes, they've been spending years and years and years creating this, as I call it, a macro simulation, a sort of world where, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are. But it's really this understanding, this societal understanding, what the narrative is all about, what has been established, what the establishment has created as reality, as truth. Using ideology, using, of course, business acumen. A lot of the power is centralized in people that have very close ties to the financial industries, of course. And really, so there's easy funding. You have, largely these groups that hold, very rich individuals, and conglomerates own much of the mainstream media, and more of the mollusk or middle media. Your Young Turks and so on and so forth are getting more and more money from people like the Koch brothers. Actually, Koch brother, rest in peace, David Koch, the plutocrat, the oligarch. But, he is human, so we should, of course, show our respects to David Koch and every conservative's favorite boogeyman, every Q follower's favorite boogeyman, George Soros, of course, also funds a lot of these things. But, there's great incentive to keep the narrative going because you have what is defined. There isn't an unknown here. It's what people have come to understand as reality. And some of it's true, and some of it's fantasy, some of it's magic, some of it's linguistic propaganda, some of it, some people might call them conspiracy theories if they didn't want to think too critically. I consider it more, most people to be conspiracy analysts, because you're not really theorizing so much as you're analyzing an existing theory that was established. The genesis was by somebody else. So they're grasping at what remains of their feeding paradigm, and their entire careers have been built around it. What do they do when the tides turn? Can their analysis ever be trusted again? So can they change their story without any sort of negative consequence or repercussions? I don't see how they can do that without losing their credibility, without losing their truthiness, as the late Stephen Colbert once said. It must be scary. I do sympathize with them. Like, your paradigm is slowly ending. The Reagan-era paradigm of the neoliberals, the neocons, it's slowly coming to an end. I'm not sure if it's going in a more a conservative direction with the Gen Z, the Zoomers, or if it's going in a more progressive, as they say. And I do have a new video out, Word Thinking, Reactionary, and Progressive, so check that out on BitChute and YouTube, of course. But, are we going in a more progressive direction with Bernie Sanders and, to some degree, Elizabeth Warren, of course, Andrew Yang, and to some degree, Tulsi Gabbard, Marianne Williamson? Are we going in that Jill Stein Green Party direction? I mean, the way that you see that Tulsi Gabbard and Jill Stein and all these individuals have been treated. Andrew Yang with the blackout, the media blackout, where he doesn't matter where they are in polls, the DNC will say, well, you're not in the right poll. You're not in the poll that we would like you to be in. So, of course, and with their media partners, in the modern religion that is institutions, you have state, media, and academia. You have your state and media partners, your collusion, as the WikiLeaks emails back in 2016 showed. Of course, the Democrat Party did collude with the mainstream media to keep that narrative going and to keep it consistent, because, it's harder to spot lies when everything just keeps on remaining consistent. Of course, they would send their articles to John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chair, during the 2016 election, and they'd, ask for approval, and maybe you want to do a little editing. Of course, there were people ghostwriting articles. I mean, this happens on both sides, but we have it recorded in WikiLeaks. So, can their analysis ever be trusted again? I don't think so. especially after the president and many others have popularized the term fake news, in which, people are spinning, as they always have. They've always spun the news. There's always been a bit of spin in a direction. Maybe the establishment wants it. Maybe the pharma companies, whoever is funding. Check the commercials of your favorite mainstream media outlet, your TV station, Fox News. How many of those are pharma companies and medicine companies? How much are funded by the military-industrial complex? And yeah, how many kickbacks do those pundits get? Of course, follow the money. With any modern religion, notably institutions, you need to follow the money, because state media, they really put those two words together. State media. They have incentive. They have all kinds of funding, and the gears of power keep on turning. So they can't change their story. Don't expect the mainstream media to become more credible or to become less pro-war. They will try to create conflicts, because conflicts create ratings. They create ratings. And if you have any other ideas as to what conflicts can create, do leave me a comment below, please. Thank you. And yeah, moving on. So I have a series of tweets here, 4 tweets from June 2018, talking about creating a vision of the world in your head. So let me go read this, and then we will break it down. When you've created a vision in your head of what the world is, what reality is, it's literally world-shattering to consider that you might not have the details right. You might say that the truth is obvious when it's actually largely subjective. It's a composite in our heads. There is the physical reality we all share, and the subjective window on reality that each person observes through. In the physical world, what happened, happened. In the world of our minds, potential is infinite, and we judge reality based on a model of prediction, expectation. When physical reality does not conform to our expectations, it's easy for us to become disoriented. Wait, there was a step before that. I'm sorry. That wasn't correct. This line was, wait, there was a step there before. Wait, there was a step there before. Meaning that you thought something would be there, but it wasn't there. So this applies even more so to the world of thought. An idea accepted as fact, initially, repeated ad nauseum, never challenged, reinforced. This idea will ultimately become fact in a person's head, becoming very difficult to question. If the person chooses not to reassess this information, whether true or false, this part of their window on reality has been set in stone. The story is over. It is now scripture. So it's hard set reality. All right, so this starts here. When you've created a vision in your head of what the world is, what reality is, it's literally world-shattering to consider that you might not have the details right. So yes, confirmation bias can be overwrought, can be, overemphasized. It can get over. That's the greatest prefix you could come up with. You can have too much confirmation bias. You can get stuck in a singular worldview, very, very singular. Of course, you want to be an individual, but you also want to be somewhat adaptable, somewhat flexible, but you'll get stuck. Your confirmation bias is just you know what the world is. Even the things that seem unknown, you're stuck in that sort of, I guess you could say, echo chamber. And you've heard the same message over and over and over again. And it's become reality over time, because there's nothing there to challenge it. There's no dissent. Now, you might have gone through a process. Of course, you did go through a process of A, being good ideas, bad ideas, right, wrong, and everything in between. You come to your conclusions through probably a merit-based process, a veracity-based process, using the scientific method, looking for evidence, looking for rationality and reason throughout. But of course, it can be world-shattering when anybody, me, you, anybody, has their confirmation bias exploded with new ideas that they didn't think possible, a new angle that they didn't consider before. So it can be world-shattering if you get so used to your world, your reality. You know that up is up, down is down, left and right. Everything makes sense, but then a new piece of information comes in. And with your cognitive dissonance muscles, if they're weak, you'll just keep on bouncing things off without considering them because you have your confirmation. And it can be a shock to lose that singular, concrete view of what is what it is. So you might say that the truth is obvious. Like, I got this. Guys, I got this. The truth is obvious. We know what it is. Settled science. It's over. We got it. Don't need to do any more question asking. No subjectivity here. It's objectively true. And now I'm going to fact check you to make sure you match up with what's going on in my echo chamber, which I'm now living in, perhaps, where I should be just vacationing there. I'm actually living there. But that happens to us all. That's not something that happens to specific people. It's something that is just part of the human condition. So you might say that the truth is obvious when it's actually largely subjective. There are, as Scott Adams says, 2 movies on one screen, and there's always another way. There's over 7.6 billion perspectives in this world, and everybody has their own way of looking at things. The same sentence doesn't look the same to the 2 different people. One sentence, 2 people, 2 meanings sometimes. And actually, I was looking for a little a thought experiment myself. Just a sidebar here. In the comments section below, think of some adjectives that can be used for positive, negative, and neutral. I know there are some words out there, and I was thinking about this. I haven't come up with a list yet, but maybe you can help me start. So please leave me a comment below with some of your adjectives that can mean positive, negative, or neutral. So yes, it's a composite in our heads, the truth, because we have the objective truth out there, the outer world truth, and then we have our inner world, subjective truth, like what we see, how we process the patterns that we encounter in the world. So we have a composite of what happened, what we remember, what actually happened. Our emotions are tied into that, so there's that emotional element that can create irrationality in our memories, because of course we were probably mind reading, we were probably projecting a little bit, but we have all kinds of ways of recording information in our heads, all different areas. So there is, of course, like I said, the physical reality we all share, the observable, concrete, outer world, objective reality. We know how physics works in our world. We can't question the fact that we all live and we die, and that there are certain interactions between certain chemicals, and just the way that life works, nature works. It's all very well defined. And of course, people's words, actions, and how they impact reality as well. So then there's the subjective window. The window, like the one I'm looking at. We record these videos in the window. The window, subjective as it is, on reality that each person observes through. So you have the physical world. What happened, happened. Okay, you can't dream it away. You can't imagine it away. You can't use any sort of postmodern, post-truth filter and make reality go away. If something happens and there are enough observers, usually two or more, and there's a consensus reality formed, of course, we have that physical world where what happened, happened. If you have a war and you drop a bomb on a country or they drop a bomb on you, people die, there's catastrophe, there's trillions of dollars, maybe even millions of lives, whatever it might be, lost. That's all real. I mean, there's no dreaming that away. But of course, there's 2 or 3 or 7.6 billion ways to look at that true reality, that tangible reality. In the world of our minds, potential is infinite. We don't have a cap on potential. Anything's possible, you know. That's why we have things like our axioms. We have our religions, our gods out there. And of course, then you have things like simulation theory and other competing theories, multiverse, all these things that show that there's potential for that. It's possible. We don't know everything. The truth is unknowable, so we fill in the blanks with different angles on what could be. We judge reality based on a model of prediction, expectation. So once something has been established, once something new happens, the potential is there for that to happen again. People always consider that. If it happened once, it can happen again. Sometimes that's true, sometimes that's false. But it helps when we see that certain behaviors, of course, cause certain reactions. Certain actions cause certain reactions, and the system goes back and forth. You can observe physics, you can observe through a scientific lens, however you'd like to do it. But we do judge reality based on prediction. Okay, our brains fill in the blanks. We get so much information from our environment. We look at out through our 5 senses. We look at all the things. We look at computers and how they record reality. We look at all this stuff, and then we go, well, we can probably infer what happened. So, yes, expectation. So when physical reality does not conform to our expectations, it's easy for us to become disoriented. Like I said, wait, there was a step there before. And then you trip down the step because you expected it to be there. But it wasn't there. Your expectation did not meet reality. And that's how people can get truly hurt, because they they get muscle memory. Then they get used to certain environments. This is how the blind, of course, are able to memorize where things are. Okay, then other animals, other species have their own way of doing things. You have cats that use smell. They mark their territory. They map out the world. And then when things move, well, there's no object permanence there, and they go, what the hell is going on? Works the same way with ideas, thoughts, and how our inner subjective reality reflects in the outer world. Like, does it match, or is it totally separate? The further our subjective reality is from the objective outer reality, that's kind of the the space where some people might say, well, you're living in clown world, you're living in cloud cuckoo land, you're crazy, you're insane. This is the yardstick. You're not acting in accordance with observable reality, so you're not with it. You might have psychosis, whatever it might be, you're acting irrationally. You're not acting according to what everybody can observe. Lowest common denominator. We're all human. We all observe the world. If you're off in clown world over here and you're saying things that don't reflect in physical reality, yeah, people will start to say, well, what's going on there mentally? But of course, that's those people. That's not your average person that's just facing new things they hadn't seen before and maybe mildly disoriented. So this applies more so to the world of thought, getting disoriented when physical reality does not conform to our expectations. It applies more so to the world of thought, an idea accepted as fact initially, repeated ad nauseum, never challenged, reinforced. This idea ultimately becomes fact in the person's head, becoming very difficult to question. So again, it's really hard because we know certain things are true, and we know certain things are false, but there's a whole lot out there that we don't know the true potential of. So we use our imagination, okay? And if it's something bad or something good, regardless, but if it's something bad especially, if it's something that fills you with fear, the sky's the limit because our survivalism kicks in. We don't want to face things that could really challenge us and harm us in the long run. That's kind of a general statement, but we don't want to turn over stones. It's a very hard process to persuade me, you, or anybody else to turn over stones they've already turned over before. Because what if they're looking out there at the world? What if I'm looking out there and I see, well, there's a lot of people that are acting irrationally. So what is the bar for me? Like, different people have different levels that they want to conform to with this. They say, well, if everybody's acting irrationally this way, I can act irrational too. I guess there's a little bit of that copycat. Like, if you're allowed to do it, it's hypocritical if I can't. There's all different angles to this. So I do say, if the person chooses, it's a choice, it's always your choice. If they choose not to reassess the information, whether true or false, this part of their window on reality has been set in stone. So it's almost like putting up a part of a painting over your window. It just colors. It's almost like putting up stained glass, like in a church glass in the window. And it just colors everything that comes in. That filter colors all the incoming information and gives it the colors of how that filter is configured, how it's arranged, what the art in that case is, if you're using the analogy or metaphor of a church window. So it gets set in stone and the story is over. It's become, well, using the church analogy was good because it becomes scripture. It just becomes a rock-solid part of their worldview. Now, I'm not saying, we always talk about how, on this channel especially, how absolutism has its ups and its downs. And that's about it, just up or down and nothing in between. Reality is that thinking in absolutes is often a fool's errand, so I do try to stay away from it. But again, I also understand that sometimes you just need to take a side. Okay, we're working on this plane of existence, this level of meta-awareness of everything going on. We have our books, we have our everyday reality where we see things happening. We have academics saying one thing, we have politicians saying another thing, sometimes the same thing. But often we have these different filters, these different angles and perspectives. But then you have people that just go with their religion or their ideology. They just go with what they know, what they have found to be familiar, what they've found to hold merit, to hold veracity. And of course, there are different levels of awareness of how religious we may be. In my case, I remain largely agnostic. That means that I could change my opinion, but I do have some viewpoints. You can search for my positions on different issues on Twitter. Just go up to the search bar and go, Real Jeff Tidwell, my position on, to see my positions. So it's okay to have a position, and it's okay to have, to some degree, an absolute one. Okay, your mileage may vary, but I try to remain as flexible as possible. But of course, when you set it in stone, you'd better be right. You'd better be right. Because if you're wrong, well, I don't know. It depends on how important the issue you're talking about is, but you might have trouble fitting in with a lot of your friends that see it differently. As I say with my video, the relationship effects of climate change, things that seem like they're just, other concerns, they do become a large part of the worldview and the day-to-day life and concerns of people. They become a pattern in the heads of people that can be very important and become part, especially if you mix morality and identity, become part of our identity. So on this channel, I largely preach this message of listening to both sides and, of course, hearing everybody out, keeping the dialogue open, not falling prey to the modern religion of censorship, and letting everybody have a voice, even if they might be right, they might be wrong, somewhere in between. However it might be, they may be, as you think, dangerous, destructive, or hateful, or they might be going too far. But regardless, I think they should be able to speak so we can find those outer limits, using that imagination, that infinite imagination we have, finding, constructing some kind of order that isn't too limited, too strict, but at least we have some sort of baseline, so we have control over the situation. We have a window that conforms to reality. So we do, I think we, like I say in some of the videos, art-minded folks think big, think huge. They make huge asks, big asks, just like in the world of persuasion. But of course, when reality comes in, when pragmatism comes in, that filter has to be applied. You have to look at outcomes. You have to look at what works and what doesn't work. It can't always be the sky's the limit. That is a nice place to be able to go. I say you should be able to increase your ego to the top so you have a full range of ability depending on the situation. I talk about that in one of my recent videos that will be available soon in segment format. But absolutism, of course, is something that, you should be able to swing in and out of. Hey, that's a contradiction, right? You shouldn't be absolutist. You should be able to go back and forth. Well, then you wouldn't be an absolutist. But again, sometimes people feel that they got to put all their energy in one direction. They have to move the vector and try to change things, to shake things up. To get reality to fall into a different formation if things aren't going the way they like. So, yeah. When you've created a vision in your head of what the world is, it's literally world-shattering to consider that you might not have the details right. So definitely watch my video, Cognitive Dissonance Workout Routine. Exercise those cognitive dissonance muscles. Work on your confirmation bias so you have it, but it doesn't overwhelm. Again, there's that prefix over. It doesn't overwhelm your logic centers. It doesn't, you don't get too used to things when there's a possibility that the truth could be different. Onward and upward. More tweets. So if you're not on Gab, definitely get on Gab. That is their Twitter handle, Get on Gab. Use their Dissenter app. You can comment on any URL online. They also, I believe, they have their free speech web browser. That's www.dissenter.com, www.gab.com. Of course, I'm also on Minds. And they recently had their Minds IRL event in Pennsylvania. I did not get to go. I was not invited. But I'm not sure if I would have been able to make it. So it was good to see that the Post-Millennial and a bunch of other groups did articles, and there were some write-ups. I believe there's a gentleman that spoke, Daryl Davis, and of course you had people like the red-headed libertarian there, and of course Tim Pool, and so on and so forth. It was, of course, organized in part by Bill Ottman, who runs and owns, or is a large part of the founding team of Minds.com, which of course is sort of a Facebook alternative. And I do say, check out the free market, okay? If you have a YouTube channel, I recommend you also get on BitChute. They have their importer tool. Lets you take your videos from YouTube, your entire channel, in fact, and back it up in one click. One click to back up your whole channel from YouTube to BitChute. So definitely check out that feature as well. I do like to promote the alternative alt tech sites because, as you can see, as the 2020 U.S. presidential election approaches, we're going to be seeing a little more of the censorship and the social engineering that became characterized largely. We got to see the nuts and bolts of it using Project Veritas, and they're looking into Google and the leaks from those people that were whistleblowing Google. So there is a lot of what you could call election interference going on. And I say, hey, if you want your voice to be heard, let's build up these alt sites. Of course, Dailymotion, Vimeo for videos, and I am also on Parler and Telegram. And if you want to check out my art, Instagram, but that's also a Zuckerberg product. And hey, whatever works for you. But again, I think that there is a strength in diversity. It shows that, you have options. You have a choice. If one content provider, if they can't be determined to be a platform or a publisher, if they're not doing their job to promote free speech, of course, some would argue they're a business. They don't promote, our values here in America, or maybe in Hong Kong, where Hong Kong would like to have more free speech. They'd like to have a Second Amendment. Well, I'm going to keep on fighting for free speech. In fact, I have a new video out, The First Amendment, The Enlightenment, and XKCD. Check that out on my channel, where I talk a little bit more about free speech and what's been going on the past year or two online when it comes to tech censorship, big tech coming down, social engineering, telling you that it was the algorithm. We've changed our algorithms. Well, who writes those? Human beings. So you have also, of course, those manual decisions. No pun intended. A person sits down and makes exceptions for certain websites and makes sure that certain words can't be said. And there's all these different things. They say, well, you're demonetized because the advertisers, you're not advertiser friendly. And if it's not advertisers, it's the algorithm. They thought you weren't friendly to our ideology. You're gone because of ideology. That's what we're fighting against here, folks. And I hope you join me with a subscribe, a like, and a comment below. Definitely follow me over on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. So, figured I'd get that all in there. I love talking about free speech because really that's the best way to keep it going. Don't worry about subjective, arbitrary terms like hate speech. It doesn't exist. It is in the mind's eye. It is a subjective view, as I've been discussing here. And, of course, people will use all sorts of newspeak, linguistic, filters, and put a post-truth spin on things so that you can't speak. They'll run you through the phases of censorship. Of course, the first phase is self-censorship. They'll say you should stop talking. Maybe you're not qualified to talk. You don't have the credentials. Let the experts speak, they might say. Of course, Richard Feynman said, science is the belief in the ignorance of the experts. Okay? So then you have the second phase of censorship, passive censorship. They say, you shouldn't listen to that guy over there. Okay? Jeff Tidwell, don't listen to him. Okay? He has some dangerous views. He's wrong. He's not scientifically correct. He doesn't conform to our ideology. Okay? He doesn't conform to right think. He's a wrong thinker. Don't listen. They'll smear you. They might defame you. But that's all part of passive censorship. Once they have control, they go to the final stage. It's called active censorship. That's where they silence you. Because, hey, moral virtue and universal truth await in the modern religion that is censorship. So, 2 more tweets for you today. Another hot day here in Massachusetts. September is on, but summer is not over. It's up and down here. Tweet. So here is a tweet that I want to talk about. We have a number of tweets here, but some are better than others. So, a problem one may face when they endlessly criticize a person or group, regardless of the party's actions, is that their critiques can be ignored. When they endlessly criticize, their critiques can be ignored. The party in question can safely assume, given enough information, that no solutions exist to the critic in question. So why listen? Why change? It's a great question. If somebody doesn't conform to meritocracy, if they don't give you credit where due, if they only give you accolades, or if they only give you criticisms, they're not conforming to a meritocratic system. So it becomes difficult to determine. Like if you're looking at the pattern, it becomes difficult to determine what you should do. Well, if they're never, well, it becomes easy. If they lock you into a pathway where they always say, you're wrong. You're doing it bad, you're bad. Even when you do the right thing, if they say you're bad, they don't give credit. Or if you're doing the wrong thing and they love you, they're biased towards you, they have preference for you, and they give you a pass. They let you go and they say, look, you didn't fuck up. You're great. No matter, everything you do is great. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they say, and the thing is, yeah, people love, to be pushed along. They love positive affirmation. They love to be promoted. Even if they didn't do the best job ever, it is actually a good thing if somebody did some good stuff and some bad stuff, looking at both, commenting on both. But I always say giving the accolades first and then the criticisms. Give the feedback and let them know if they've done the right thing or not. But you need to give credit for things that were good and, of course, dissent for things that you didn't like. But if you always give, in this case I talk about just criticism. So if you're giving endless criticism to a person or group, and no matter what they do, they change their ways, they do what you want them to do, and you still criticize them, well, what incentive did they have to continue? Okay, if you can't be made happy, if you can't be made whole by what they're doing, eventually they go, well, if I keep on doing this thing and I'm making an action, there's no positive reaction, there's no incentive for me to continue doing it. I'm looking for a solution. But if there's no solutions here, if this person is never happy, why would I continue to invest time and energy if this person can't be made happy? So I say, if you'd like people to, respect your requests, respect you, give them some credit where due, criticize them where necessary. But you can't do all or the other. It can't be absolutist, because that way it confuses things. It confuses the situation, and eventually people, when they see that they're doing the same action again and again and again, well, they don't want to be an idiot. Doing the same action again and again and again and getting the same awful result, you're not very smart if you keep on doing the same thing expecting something different to happen. So they give up. The wise move is often to just give up and stop trying to appeal to that group that can't be pleased. So I say, if you'd like things to change, well, give some merit where merit is due, okay? And don't judge people just by who they are, right? Judge them based on their words and their actions. Judge them based on logos, not just ethos. And don't use just pathos to, let your emotional first impression, your first response, your animal brain, don't bring that in and let that guide your decision-making process. Of course, talking about free will, I'm not sure if I talked about this on last video, or we have some videos out there where I discuss rational and irrational free will. The fact that, yes, there are causality, there's a sequence of events that happen since the Big Bang, and in everybody's life where there are certain genes, there are certain DNA, there's certain the past leading to this point, there's been certain systems in play, certain things put through again and again and again, like I say, reinforced, that created this reality. And then largely people's decisions are made subconsciously and they rationalize them later. So that's the irrational free will that we have as human beings. Okay, like we can't just fly across the galaxy. We can't do whatever we want, but do we have choice? Some people say, well, you don't have there's no such thing as free will, They'll say, well, and I call that the rational free will, where, yes, people are coded to act a certain way. If their behaviors, if you do the same thing every day, well, you're going to have that behavior. That's the lifestyle that you lead. Those are the actions that you do every day. It's predictable. You know what's coming. So that's why I promote in my videos. I say, well, that's all well and good, but we should get better at, exercising our individual agency, our personal liberty, and taking responsibility for things, and not just doing what feels right every time, challenging ourselves to think bigger, and of course, then try to bring that into a rational frame, from the dream world into reality. It can happen, okay? But, yeah, you have to give credit where it's due. Otherwise, like, what's the value in doing the right thing? You have to have incentive. We're an incentive-based species. You have to have incentive, and you have to have a known reward for doing. You get the dopamine hit when you do something that you feel good about. That's right. You get accolades when you do what is right. And you get criticism when you do something that isn't quite right. You might get some feedback. That's just meritocracy. So don't endlessly criticize. Try to find something good. My hair is all over the place. Look at that. Crazy, isn't it? Try to find something good where someone can work on it. If you endlessly criticize and don't offer any path forward, well, you're not doing a great service to the person nor yourself. Okay. Got one more tweet coming up. Rest in peace, Anthony Bourdain. I loved Anthony Bourdain. Sad he's gone. Okay, so I'll finish up here with climate change, as I sometimes refer to it, at least this alarmist ideology of climate alarm. I refer to it as the modern religion that is global warming. But there's plenty of merit to the climate discussion and the concern we have as Americans and as world citizens. So, just taking a look here. All right. So I'm talking to Scott Adams Says here on Twitter. Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, and he has his morning show, Real Coffee with Scott Adams, here on YouTube. Check it out. It's also on Periscope. And he has a new book coming out too called Loser Think, which I actually just pre-ordered, so I'm looking forward to that. So I say here, climate change is such a complex topic, but I like to see new approaches to combating the effects scientists have observed, notably the effects caused by people, the anthropogenic portion of climate change. So here's to this technology being successful, and life on Earth getting better for every life form. So I'm talking here about carbon capture and, of course, Generation 3 and Generation 4 nuclear. Check out Mark Schneider on Twitter. Sub Schneider is his handle, and he talks about Generation 4 nuclear quite often. It's actually pretty cool technology. It's experimental. It's actually being put into development because these things, of course, they are very expensive to develop. But Generation 4 has a few key features that I think are worth mentioning. It can't melt down. Generation 4 nuclear can't melt down. And of course, it also uses nuclear waste for fuel. So there's this sort of recycling element to it. But that isn't the whole story. that isn't the whole story. Yes, we should develop our nuclear energy and, of course, maybe convert some of our nuclear weapons across the world. I'm talking all people here. We should convert some of those things into power versus destruction. I think that that would be a good thing. Don't be scared by the Chernobyl miniseries. Yes, there have been disasters in the past, but those were older models of nuclear, such as Generation 1 and 2. Okay? 3 and 4 have looked at the past. You know, the past does not dictate the future, but we do learn from it. We can forgive, but we never forget. These newer versions of nuclear have tried to get away from the meltdown fear that many people worry about, and that many series like Chernobyl, well, they stoke those fears again. It's like this Cold War fear, the same kind of fear that the media used for Russiagate, that, you know, sort of McCarthyist Russian Cold War fears, like, oh, the Russians are out to get us. They're doing the same thing with miniseries like Chernobyl. Great series, I've heard. I'm not trying to say don't watch it, but keep in mind that it can be looked at to a degree as anti-nuclear propaganda, because that is ultimately the effect that it's had with a lot of people. So I think we should develop that. Of course, carbon capture. If you think that there's too much CO2 out there, and of course with carbon guilt, that's what it's all about, getting the carbon emissions down. I have a number of videos on that, so check those out on my channel. For example, I have a video about Entropy, talking about climate change, Entropy's take on climate change. But there's a number of videos out there, and yeah, I mean, we need to look at every option. We need to plant more trees. We need to balance, if there's any imbalance caused by anthropogenic global warming or anthropogenic climate change, where, you know, there's the fact that we may have affected it with the Industrial Revolution, that China, the United States, and other places with high carbon emissions have caused an issue. Yes, we do need to be cognizant of that, and we need to pay attention, but of course, there's also been a lot of bunk science. There's been a lot of studies out there that have not proven true. There's been a lot of claims about climate change from Al Gore and many others, Hansen, and of course Michael Mann, that have not borne out to be true, and yet they're largely unchallenged by the media, and largely unchallenged by the political party that has taken this as their wedge issue, the Democrats. They, of course, you know, have that as their, well, if you don't vote for us, you only have 7 years, 12 years, 40 years, 60, 80. There's going to be 100 million people dead because of climate change by 2100. If you don't vote for us, we'll put the fear and shame of the God of the modern religion of global warming in you. And you better vote for us. If you don't, it could be Armageddon. Climate catastrophe. So they use fear, of course. Greta Thunberg as a front for that ideology and that world. But, you know, the intentions, as with, you know, many of these modern religions or many of these ideologies, the intentions underlying are rather good. They are rather good. They want to save the world. They want it to be cleaner, clean air, clean water. And we should, of course, you know, I believe in all that. I'm an environmentalist and an agnostic to global warming because, you know, you spend 30 or 40 years talking about the ozone layer and Manhattan's going to be underwater and blah, 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 blah. And then you look back and you say, well, why weren't things happening? You know, we talk about the Industrial Revolution and burning fossil fuels, but there was a spike in CO2 before the heat went up, right? So there's this question about, like, you know, is burning fossil fuels, I might have that wrong, so put a comment below if I have that wrong about CO2, but CO2 and temperature, there's this question of, like, correlation and causation there. You know, what goes up first? Does CO2 go up and then the temperature goes up, or does the CO2 go up because the temperature goes up? So using the question around that, they've said, well, we have a chart here, and whenever the temperature goes up, CO2 goes up too. Well, I'm no scientist, seek subject matter experts, but again, there's correlation, there's not causation established. But of course, if you're a layman like me, or you, largely potentially, tell me if you're a layman in the comments section below. I'm going by what the scientists say. And so it gets hard when some scientists say, well, we believe in global warming. I mean, again, there's long-term and then there's short-term, of course, where, it might go up over the course of 100 years, but if you look at it in the context of 1,000 years, there's a different trend. There's all this different sophistry that can take place with this. So if you're someone like me, like a layman, I'm not an expert, I just know I have a rudimentary knowledge of all these things. I could be easily fooled by any study because I'm just going by what people that I believe have credentials, have merit and veracity to their argument. I'm going by what they say. I'm putting faith in them over reason. I don't have the reason because I'm not one of those climate scientists. So it doesn't really matter if you believe in climate change or not. I do believe that the climate is changing. Okay, I do believe in that. I actually have another video, the Anthropogenic Global Warming Glossary #1, talking about climate alarm and climate skeptic. And I consider myself a climate skeptic. As an agnostic, I'm not fully on board because I've seen so many patterns, I've heard from so many scientists, I've read so many things, that I honestly, it could go either way. It could go either way. But do I want to destroy the world economy? Do I want to eliminate fossil fuels, eliminate fracking? No. Because once you've gotten to this point, it's not a slippery slope where you continue again and again, but we've gotten to this level of world development where things would change too much if we were to eliminate all these things. Now, coal we might be able to get rid of. It's kind of dirty. And we should be looking into solar and, of course, wind. Wind, we can still look at wind. I don't know how effective or efficient wind is, but solar, we should certainly get better at developing it and making it more cost effective. But of course, nuclear power, refining our natural gas and fossil fuel process, and even finding a way for coal to continue existing in some capacity until the world economy puts coal aside. That's my position on coal. But either way, we should be working on it. We should be trying to prevent whatever outer limit awful prophecy takes place in the modern religion of global warming. True or not, much like the God above, whether they exist or not, well, you still want to conform to that moral core, that moral code, and do the right thing. So, all right, everybody. I've had a great time talking about my tweets tonight. Thank you very much for watching. As I said before, check me out, please, on Twitter, @RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Minds, Gab, Telegram, Parler, and Instagram. If you enjoyed the video on YouTube or BitChute, please hit like and subscribe. Hit the little bell for notifications. And as I say every week, everything I said today might be wrong. Or everything I said today might be right. Or perhaps some of it was right and some of it was wrong. I think that's closer to the truth. So, thanks for stopping by. I'll see you again next week, and have a good night.